welcome. You're watching NewsX with me, Devika Chopra. It has been more than 48 hours since the Baloch Liberation Army hijacked the Jaffar Express, which was en route Peshawar from Quetta. The BLA's primary goal was to secure the release of the Baloch prisoners lodged in jails across Pakistan. However, Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has now claimed that the rescue operations have ended with 21 hostages dead along with 4 soldiers and 33 Baloch insurgents neutralized. Even so, contradicting eyewitness accounts have now emerged, with some saying that more than 50 hostages were killed by the rebels. Additionally, more than 30 ambulances and 100 coffins are now stationed in Quetta. What is evident is that Pakistan continues to grapple with a crisis in the West. The Baloch's quest for freedom has not died down. But what does this latest attack on the train mean? Joining me on the broadcast is Mr. Mehran Murray. He is the Baloch representative in the UN and the EU. Mr. Murray, can you hear me?
Yeah, clearly, yeah.
Mr. Murray, I begin by asking you, the Pakistan Army claims that 33 BLA militants have been neutralized. Can you confirm these reports?
I think we should not believe anything that Pakistani army says. They rely upon just lies from the beginning. So I don't think we should listen to anything what the Pakistani army says. I think the operation is still underway. The Baloch are still holding the Pakistani soldiers hostage.
You think,
as
sir?
POWs.
Mr. Murray, pardon me, but you think or you know?
That's what our facts reveal.
Okay.
It is very contrary to what the Pakistani army is saying.
So could you shed further light?
Sorry?
Could you shed further light on what you're telling us as per
yes,
your reports?
I have just tweeted half an hour ago that there should be international fact-finding missions for the situation in Balochistan in general, but in particular for the train incident. They should go as soon as possible to investigate the reality about the situation at present. Because Pakistan generally lives in denial, and especially in this incident, they've cordoned off the whole area. They've cordoned off miles around where the incident is happening. They said nobody died. We believe most of the soldiers or most of the people in this incident are not accounted for. So there should be a fact-finding mission. The reality and the truth will be revealed.
Mr. Murray, as per reports, 21 hostages have been killed along with 4 Pakistani soldiers. Keeping the deaths of the soldiers aside, what was the need to kill innocent civilians?
I think killing innocent civilians is a terrorist act, but there was no innocent civilians on that train, or if they were released in the first phase of the releasing of people. Women and children were released. Only Pakistani soldiers were kept on the train by the Baloch fighters. That's the information that I have, and that's the information which was put forward by them in the international media.
So you're saying that of the hostages, no innocent civilian has been killed?
Absolutely not. I mean, they have claimed that nobody has been killed. No dead bodies have come forward. All these 200 tabuts were sent by the Pakistani military to Quetta station because they were willing to sacrifice their 200 soldiers in captivity. But the Baloch fighters said, we treat them as POWs, but the Pakistani generals treat them as gun fodder. Probably Beijing told them to sacrifice their people and to get the sympathy of the world.
So it is only the soldiers currently that are being held hostage by the BLA?
Actually, in fact, I think that is the truth, yes. And one more thing, we must keep in mind, because the Pakistani army runs the show, for them it's like a puppet show. Any war, any incident is a puppet show. Shehbaz Sharif had to wait for 30 hours to get his instructions from Pindi what to say. And then after 30 hours, he just woke up and passed a comment. It's very sad to see what's going on. The journalists in Pakistan do not exist. There is no journalists. They're all yellow journalists being paid by Pindi, toe the line of ISPR. Have you seen people who come on your shows? What do they say? They say everything is hunky-dory, there's no situation, mutti bhar log hain, koi hoi kuch hua hi nahi, oh humne sabko rescue kar diya. Koi rescue nahi hua, sab release hue. Jo nikle hain, they've been released. And whoever is still in captivity are still in captivity. 23 idhar, 20 idhar, numbers manipulation karte hain. They downplay everything. Please send in unbiased journalists to find out what's happening. It's still happening right now.
Mr. Murray, it's also further being alleged that your supporters and handlers of the BLA are in Afghanistan. What do you say about that report that has come out?
I think that's irrelevant. We should focus on the matter at hand. The matter at hand, there's an independence war, the war of independence against Pakistani state. Baloch are struggling for the restoration of their sovereignty and territorial integrity. Who cares who's handling them, who's not handling them? It's the Baloch who are fighting their war. Why are we getting distracted by Pakistani narrative of Afghanistan, India, USSR, China, Trump administration? Please, let's not fall into that trap. They're trying to detract from the real issue. The real issue is the illegal occupation, the enforced disappearances, the subjugation of the Baloch people by the Punjabi state of Pakistan.
Mr. Murray, what was the end goal of the train hijacking? Was it targeted to reach the world? Was it to start a conversation with the Pakistani establishment?
I think it's very obvious what the end goal of an independence movement is. The end goal is to get your country back. And I don't think these are like gimmicks or ploys to get the Pakistanis to sit on the table and do what? If we wanted to sit on the table, if the Baloch people who are struggling for the independence of Balochistan, we will be in the Pakistani government and become chief ministers like the puppets they have and make money. This is not a war for making money and being puppets of the Punjabis. This is a war of independence. Baloch want their dignity back.
Right, but I'm going to pose that question once again. You've talked about the independence movement. I will once again ask, what was the end goal of the train hijacking specifically? You say that you now have Pakistani army and Pakistani soldiers that are being held hostage as per your report. So what is the end goal? What do you want out of this particular situation? Are you hoping that it gets some recognition internationally, that other countries get involved, or are you hoping to start some conversation with the Pakistani establishment and the army? What is the end goal of this particular situation?
I believe as an observer, the end goal or the whole issue at hand is the Baloch fighters proved many points to the world. First of all, they're not terrorists. If they were, they would have killed innocent people. They let the women and children out in the first phase. Secondly, they declared the Pakistani soldiers, did not butcher them. They declared them as POWs according to Geneva Conventions. But the Pakistanis don't accept that. Fine. They gave 48 hours ultimatum for prisoner release. In the last 2 months, 70 people have been forcibly disappeared. In the last 20 years, 50,000 people have been forcibly disappeared. They want political prisoners in exchange for their military soldiers, or Pakistani soldiers. But the Pakistan is not paying any attention to this. The international media is not paying any attention. The Baloch fighters are behaving like a professional army, and the Pakistani bogus army, the puppet army, is behaving like a group of thugs, not taking anything seriously, and then blaming the Baloch people for being terrorists and militants.
Mr. Murray, now that you've raised the point of the Pakistani government calling the Baloch Liberation Army or the Baloch people terrorists and militants, the Pakistan government has in fact now said that it will be cracking down on the militants and others involved in the hijacking of the train, and what they say have also been murders of civilians. How do you respond?
There is no government in Pakistan. Pakistan is one country. The army has a country. The country doesn't have an army. People like Sharifs, Zardaris and Bhuttos, they're puppets of the government. They're there to serve and protect the military. They will only tote the narrative of the military, Pakistani army. So there is no government in Balochistan or in Pakistan. I do not even consider them credible sources of information. We should totally ignore them.
Mr. Murray, because there is no credible source of information, as you say, and the world continues to struggle with that, because we don't know whether we are supposed to believe what the Baloch Liberation Army is saying, or are we supposed to believe what the Pakistani government establishment army is saying, right? That fact is the only established fact at this point in time. I just want to understand from you, do you think somewhere with the hijacking of the train, and as you claim, it's a narrative that is being spun by the Pakistani establishment saying that the Baloch Liberation Army has killed innocent civilians. Do you think somewhere that narrative could dent the credibility of the Baloch Liberation Movement? Because how will you differentiate yourselves from any other militant or terrorist group? What is the evidence or proof that you have for the claims that you are making?
With all due respect, that's the reason I'm shouting out loud. Please send in a fact-finding mission. Tell the Pakistani government within the next 12 hours, the international community, be it the Indians, say we're going to send a fact-finding mission, unbiased journalists, to come and investigate the train incident. Because it's ongoing. I'm saying it's ongoing. They're saying it's all over. Please send a team. The truth, doodh ka doodh, pani ka pani ho jayega. Please, why don't you guys take, the action at this point, rather than playing the blame game, who's right, who's wrong. Let's prove it. Send a fact-finding mission, and we'll know what's the reality on the ground.
Okay, you tell me, if a fact-finding mission were to be sent, what would they really find?
They would find the Pakistani army is lying through their teeth. They are so embarrassed of what's happened to them, of their incapability and their inefficiency, that they've always boasted. You know Pakistan Army, being an Indian, better than me. Look what happened in 1971. 90,000 soldiers kept their guns surrendered in front of General Arora. This is a coward army that works for money, works for their salary. It's not a professional army. It's made by the British. British ke badaulat inko ek mulk mil gaya. And we should not take them seriously at all. I think the Baloch have been weak because we've not had strong friends in the international community. Otherwise, they're nothing to be feared.
Mr. Murray, are leaders of the international community reaching out to leaders of the Baloch movement at this point in time? Is there anything on that front that you can perhaps share with us?
I would love it if they do. I hope that's why we were appealing to Mr. Trump. Because how he's dealt with the Ukraine. When something is wrong, is wrong. Pakistan started this war. They occupied us. We've been crying out for the last 75 years. Now I think the onus is on the international community and our strong neighbors like India, China, and other powers in the region to come and interfere and put an end to this atrocity. This genocide cannot continue forever.
Mr. Murray, what does that interference really look like to you? Does that look like Pakistan being split into several smaller countries, several smaller nations, several smaller states? What does that interference by an international community really look like?
Absolutely not. Pakistan should be the way Pakistan was meant to be. Pakistan, if it happily wants to be Sindh and Punjab, they can be Sindh and Punjab. Balochistan was an independent country. It was forcibly annexed. We want to be independent. We don't want to break Pakistan. We just want our country back. So Pakistan, good luck to them. Punjab can be Pakistan. Or if they want to choose another name, we want to be Pakistan. They can choose Punjabistan for themselves. But we don't want to be with them. We want our country back and our dignity back and our resources back.
Okay, but Mr. Murray, in the recent past, in the recent history, how many such examples would you say there are of nations emerging out of larger nations through such war and conflict?
No,
until and unless one is...
It does not have to be war and conflict. I represented Balochistan almost for 20 years in the United Nations Human Rights Council. I always gave the example of East Timor. It came out peacefully from Indonesia. We said, let's have a referendum under the supervision of the international community, under the supervision of the United Nations, but nobody listens to us. Now it has come. People like me are banned from speaking on international platforms. People like Maharang Baloch are treated like criminals in Islamabad when she goes for a peaceful march to get notice of our issues, to get the forcibly disappeared people back. We Baloch have no options left. If we don't defend ourselves, we will all be killed. And there'll be ethnic cleansing is going on. The Punjabis are carrying out genocidal ethnic cleansing of the Baloch nation. The Baloch have to fight for their survival. It's a war of self-defense. It's not a war of aggression.
Okay. Mr. Murray, before I let you go, one last question. Why do you think then the world has not extended the support to leaders of Balochistan previously, when many cases of forced disappearances and forced murders have been brought out by the Baloch Liberation Movement?
Because Pakistan has been always providing their services for a fee to the international community, be it to the Americans, be it to the Europeans, be it to the Chinese. They will work for a fee. They're the best mercenary army and the best country for sale on the planet. So where do we compare? We cannot provide the services that Pakistani military can provide as mercenaries to the world. So there, be it in Afghanistan, be it in Palestine, the Pakistani army is killed, be it in Bangladesh, they raped 200,000 Bengali Muslim women. This is the army we're talking about. We cannot provide these kind of cheap services for money. Therefore, people ignore us, and unfortunately, begaraton ka daur hai, so they get priority.
All right, Mr. Mehran Mari, thank you so much for joining us on NewsX to put across your point of view. I also have with me viewers on the broadcast, Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee and Professor Madhav Nalapat. Ambassador Mukherjee, I begin with you, ma'am. You've just heard an extensive conversation with Mr. Mehran Mari. What does one really make of the situation currently in Pakistan? Because the Baloch Liberation Army insists that the information coming out of Pakistan must not be believed and that there must be an independent fact-finding committee that ought to be sent. Is the current world or the current world scenario conducive to anyone actually entering Pakistan or caring about the situation that's unfolding in Pakistan?
In the first instance, our guest from Balochistan correctly explained to the Indian audience that Balochistan was never supposed to be part of Pakistan. It was forcibly annexed. That is the most important issue. We need to begin from there. Since it was annexed, after that, its development was completely neglected. It was treated like a pariah part of Pakistan, just to be exploited for its resources. And not to forget that Balochistan is 40% of Pakistan's land territory. Losing Balochistan actually means Pakistan will become the rump state of Punjab and Sindh. Secondly, this train incident which had happened, he has correctly pointed out that we have heard only one part of the story. That is correct. The second part of what he said, that the soldiers, Pakistani soldiers, hostages, have been moved to the, he didn't say it, it was there in the net yesterday, they have actually been taken away to hideouts of the BLA in the mountains. They are not there anywhere near the train at all. So the story of the Pakistani army itself is very dubious, Devika, because they said that they use snipers to take out suicide bombers. That seems to be like a fairy tale. When you take out a suicide bomber by using a sniper, his entire system explodes and he kills everybody around him. That is why he's called a suicide bomber. I have never heard of a story where people can tell me that they use snipers selectively to shoot out the suicide bombers so that the others could be freed. There are many, many loopholes in the story. It sounds to me that it would be better to have a fact-finding mission that would never be permitted by Pakistan, who would call it interference in their internal affairs. So we have to depend upon interviews like the very useful one you just conducted with our guest from Balochistan. Yesterday we had a program with Megha where we were interviewing a Pakistani journalist who of course mounts the Pakistani army line. But much more than that, Devika, is the point that this train hijack and its fallout demonstrates two things. Number one, that the Pakistani deep state and the army has virtually lost control of Balochistan. Secondly, if they are getting support from the Taliban and they had crowed over us when the Taliban took over, saying that Taliban is their strategic space in order to control India, never could the wheel have turned more 180 degrees. In that case, if there is an alliance between Taliban and the Balochis, sooner or later the Pakistani army will lose total military control over Balochistan. Then it's just a matter of time before Balochistan declares its independence. The next question would be, will the UN recognize it? That remains to be seen. But let's not forget that, for instance, when Turkey annexed half of Cyprus, which is called the TRMC, the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus. It is many, many decades now, and that is only recognized by Turkey and one more state. But the point is, it is an independent state within Cyprus. I have been there. I have been to the border, which separates TRMC from the rest of Cyprus. It is a separate state, whether the UN wants to accept it or not for political reasons. Therefore, if Balochistan becomes independent and declares itself as independent, I would not be at all surprised if one of the first countries to recognize it will be India, because the Balochistan getting annexed was never part of the discussions which took place prior to partition. It was a dirty trick played, and the Balochis have paid for it in all these decades. Now the Pakistani army has a full-fledged civil war inside 40% of its territory. Its economy is in shambles. Their politicians are under the complete control of the Pakistani deep state. Our Balochi guest was quite right. I would like to wait and watch and hear regularly what the Balochi representative tells us, like the very interesting conversation you had with him. And only then could we be able to come to some kind of perspective. That there are negotiations, I'm told, going on for release of Balochi hostages held with the Pakistanis in return for these Pakistani soldiers who have, according to the Balochi guest, have not been martyred. They are being treated as POWs. The Pakistanis want them to be butchered so that they can then say that this is an army of terrorists, and that the BLA, which is not recognized as a terrorist organization by the UN, then goes through the process of recognition of a terrorist organization. Please remember that is very significant.
Yes.
That at no point has the BLA ever been given the designation of a terrorist organization. But within Pakistan, there are so many groups that have been designated as terrorist organizations, and Pakistan itself is the home of terrorism. So now the founder of international terrorism, that is Pakistan, is confronting civil war within its territory and is calling those who are fighting for independence as terrorists. We should not call the BLA terrorists, we should call them freedom fighters. Thank you, David.
Okay, all right. I want to leave the last word with Professor Madhav Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, since Pakistan will never allow a fact-finding commission to actually enter their territory, how does a Baloch Liberation Army or a Baloch Liberation Movement then navigate the situation where news and narratives will spread extremely quickly? As Ambassador Bhasati Mukherjee pointed out, that we must never label the Baloch Liberation Movement or the army as terrorists, but at the end of the day, there will be a thin line that will be crossed between a civil war versus a terrorist attack. How does the Baloch movement then navigate that thin line?
Look, Devika, my information is that the Baloch Liberation Army, frankly, all the Baloch different groups, and I wouldn't call them militants anymore, I'll call them freedom fighters. I'm not going to even call them militants. All of them have coalesced into one common entity fighting the Pakistan military. And I think it is everybody's everyday knowledge that the Pakistan military is heavily Punjabi, and that too from a few particular parts of Punjab, and it controls the state of Pakistan. Where Shehbaz Sharif has to do what the army wants, or he'll be where Imran Khan is now. So the reality is that, yes, my information is that women and children were, and those who were not soldiers, were released by the Baloch Liberation Army. Perhaps the next time around they'll put that on social media very prominently, so the facts become clear. They were not, quote unquote, liberated by Pakistan Army. They were freed by the Baloch, who certainly cannot be classified as terrorists, given the justice of many of their demands. So that's the first point. The second point is very clear. There's an information war going on, and in that information war, the Baloch are lagging behind. There needs to be very clearly stepping up of the information war so that the facts come out and the untruths go down. You've all heard now what's happening in Bangladesh. India played no role in the liberation of Bangladesh. Pakistan army was actually an army which was helping people and not slaughtering people. And that is now the narrative that's being peddled by the government of Bangladesh. I mean, including on social media, if you check parts of it. So I'd like to say there's no question that this is a genuine liberation movement. And may I say that in case they are they're taking refuge in Afghanistan, I am not surprised for the simple reason I think it's only a matter of time before the Pashtuns also decide they've had enough of this Punjabi domination and they wanted their own independent Pashtunistan, merging a huge part of Afghanistan with a significant chunk of Pakistan. I mean, the northern territories of Pakistan is actually Pashtunkhwa. So they want Pashtunkhwa. So let's be honest, the Pashtuns are also now active in Europe, active in human rights organizations, documenting the mass killings of the Pakistan army. And I think the Baloch need to do the same. So I do believe that this is now a full-fledged rebellion. Let's call it by its real name. It's a full-fledged rebellion against the Pakistan army, which basically is the Pakistan state. And in my view, it's only a matter of time before the Pashtun territories also erupt into this kind of open rebellion. And as far as Sindh is concerned, well, a large number of people who are Sindhi, not settlers who have come from Punjab, who are today dominating the economy of Sindh and the society of Sindh, but settlers who are Sindhi, they also would like to have their independence. So I think Pakistan is heading for, sooner than some of us predicted, its breakup. And I think that will be a welcome news for all the Pakistan people, because frankly, no one province can rule over the whole country. It's a huge mistake. India has avoided that mistake and we have remained united. Pakistan did not avoid that mistake, or the army did not avoid it. And so it is now paying the price for it. So I would say, Devika, there's a lot of truth in what our Baloch friend said. And my own information is very clear that what is happening now is that the Pakistan armed forces are trying to use the Air Force to bomb and strafe areas, parts of the train where they believe the Baloch Liberation Army is concentrated. So they have to use the Air Force. And that is what has convinced me that is now a full-scale rebellion. Otherwise, commandos would have dealt with it. But there are plenty of commandos in Pakistan, in the Pakistan army. But now they're having to use the Air Force to bomb and strafe. And I think the Baloch are correct, from my information, that they have removed the hostages, their own hostages, to a safe location so they can get their own people back. And I think it's a fair exchange. You exchange so many Baloch for a single, military personnel. And I think it will be terrible if the Pakistan army just leaves these people in the Pakistan military to basically meet their end, because it's going to affect loyalty in the army very, very badly.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much, Professor Nalapath, for joining us on the broadcast. That's all the time that we have, viewers. We step into a very quick break.